Okay, we are now live. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We are live and direct. At least I hope that we are. And welcome to another live session. We have quite a bit of things to discuss this morning. Quite unusual for us to be in the morning, but I am going to experiment with the morning to see how well we do. Now, good morning, everyone, and well, hope you're having a fantastic day. It's quite an early morning. Today, we are going to discuss a story that could affect millions of the Caribbean people, both at home and across the diaspora. Reports are emerging, including from regional news sources such as TVJ, that the new U.S. immigration and green card regulations linked to the Trump administration could dramatically change the process for applicants seeking legal residency in the United States. One of the major concerns now being discussed is whether some applicants may be required to return to their country of origin while their applications are being processed. If true, and we are going to examine the details carefully this morning, this could have enormous implications for Caribbean families, migrants, students, workers, and entire economies that depend heavily on remittances from abroad. What would this mean for Jamaicans, Haitians, Trinidadians, Guyanese, Dominicans, Barbadians, and the entire Caribbean region? And Caribbean people living in the United States right now are concerned, and they should be concerned about what is happening. Could families be separated? Could legal migration become harder? Is America entering a new era of immigration enforcement and tighter border control? And beyond immigration itself, we also need to ask a deeper question. Has the Caribbean become too dependent on the United States economically and socially? And that's a very important question. Because if Washington changes policy overnight, entire communities across the region feel the consequences immediately. This morning, we are going to break down the latest reports, what the regulations may actually mean, the political motivations behind them, and the wider geopolitical implications for the Caribbean. As always, I want to hear your views in the comments and in the live chat. Do you believe these new immigration measures are justified, or do you believe Caribbean migrants are being unfairly targeted? Let's begin the discussion. Now, we're going to be looking at and listening to something that was published by TVJ News, and they were talking to, Dahlia Walker Huntington. Is she Huntington? Yeah. And she is a lawyer outside of the United States. So let me share my screen with you, and we are going to begin with that sort of, interview to see, because we want to hear from the lawyers. We don't want to be talking and we are not properly informed. All right, so let me begin to share my screen and put Dahlia Walker Huntington on the screen. All right, let me share. How do I share now? Share screen. They always have some crazy stuff here on when you to share the screen. Let me see if it doesn't telling me that I should share the screen right now. Okay, it seems to have changed. I give you entire screen. All right, so it's not telling me to share though. It's not telling me to share. All right, so while we're waiting, how are you doing this morning while we're waiting for this interview to come up? I'm not seeing where I should share the screen. They're always changing these things up and making me look like I'm stupid. I cannot share the screen at this point. So yeah, but there was an interview with Dahlia Walker Huntington, and she's suggesting that it is indeed chaotic. I'm trying to see how best I can share the screen with you, but it is not giving me this option today. I'm not sure what's going on with this StreamYard platform thing. Normally it's easy. Let me see if I can go back outside to share the screen again. It's not even getting off. It's not even coming off the screen. Wow, what's going on here? Let me see if I can go back now on the thing, but it's not coming off. Try to be patient with me this morning. I don't know what is happening, to be frank. Oh Lord. All right, okay. I'm back. Let me see if I can share it again. Hopefully I'll be able to share the screen. I don't know what they're doing here with the, so I'm going to share my screen. Well, this is not share screen. Let me share my screen here. Share screen, and I'm sharing it. And this is what I want to share. New requirements, but it's not allowing me to share it. And I wonder why. This morning, we're having a lot of difficulties. I'm not sure how they're telling me to share a screen. This side contents of your screen. Yes, I'm telling you to share this part. Why you're not sharing it? It's weird. People, I'm having a lot of problems this morning sharing my screen, so we might have to. But what she was discussing in the video is suggesting that applicants will have to ensure she would not suggest that they leave the country, right? Because it is still chaotic, and one should consult his or her lawyer before leaving the country. I was trying to see if I could get this on the screen, but this morning I am not sure what is happening and why StreamYard is not sharing the video. Choose to share with StreamYard. This site will be able to see the contents of your screen. Right, so why don't you share it? I'm having a problem sharing. Normally it would say share, and I would share, but it's not sharing this morning. Where is it? Screen, no, this is the tab, and we share it. I'm not All right. Okay. So we're not going to share the screen because I'm having difficulty sharing the screen. But what she was saying, suggesting, is that if you are in the United States and you already have applied for your green card, it is not wise to leave. Okay. Because if you leave, then it is going to make the problem more complicated. The best thing to do is to sit and talk with your lawyer and see how you can, resolve the problem, because Trump's immigration laws are often chaotic and he may change his mind tomorrow. And once you leave the country, things might get very, very bad. Another thing, for those immigrants who are outside of the United States and they are applying for their green card, it will not affect them because it will be sent through the embassy, the U.S. embassy in your respective countries, and then it goes through Homeland Security. So the best thing to do is not at all to leave the country and say that you're going to abide by the rules, because if you leave the country, then that could be a very, very big problem. Now, we are looking at, there was an article here written in the Caribbean newspaper, suggesting that Trump faces criticism over new policy requiring Caribbean green card seekers to return home to apply. Now, he's saying here that the article says Caribbean immigration advocates in New York on Tuesday, May 22nd, strongly condemned a new policy by the Trump administration requiring that Caribbean and other green card seekers return home in order to apply for permanent residency status. In a stunning move on Friday, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, that's the USCIS, said in the new policy memo that Caribbean and other immigrants seeking adjustment of status must do so through consular processing via the Department of State outside of the country. The Trump administration's new memo is a blueprint to deny residency from immigrants who met the legal criteria to stay in the country. Murad Awadeh, that's president and CEO of the New York Immigration Coalition, that's the NYIC, an umbrella policy and advocacy organization that represents over 200 immigrant and refugee rights groups throughout New York, told the Caribbean Live. Adjustments of status in country has never been an extraordinary process, and this shift in language is an attempt to make a well-established process into an artificially restricted one, he added. Immigrant New Yorkers who are already facing escalating attacks from the federal government will face increased risk of arbitrary denials and family separations. So this is something that we have to watch, because we are already going to witness, as he's suggesting, family separations because of the law. It doesn't mean, therefore, because you speak to a lawyer, because what it seems now that the United States is no longer a legal country, a lawful country, a country that abides by, run by the rule of law. So we also have to take that into mind. It's a country run by security, run out of fear, and we can see now that it does not align itself with legal matters. But you need to still speak to a lawyer, because a lawyer is somebody who you can use to show your legal documents and what they have written. So I would encourage all of us to do that, okay? Because that is something that we need to do. Now, we need policies that expand stability and protect families, not ones that destabilize communities and punish people for pursuing lawful immigration pathways, continued Awadeh, calling on the Trump administration to rescind this flawed directive and restore the normal USCIS adjudication process for green cards. Now, USCIS said in the new policy memo that officers are directed to consider all relevant factors and information on a case-by-case basis when determining whether an alien warrants this extraordinary form of relief. Now, something that we need to look at also in the media that is going around now is the fact that we're hearing that if you are also a green card holder, meaning that you have your green card already, right? So you are a legal permanent resident. Let us say that you go to Africa where you contract the Ebola virus. They're suggesting that you cannot return to the United States with that disease. So even though you are a legal permanent resident, it means, therefore, that you have to return to your country of origin until you're cured of the virus before you can go back to the United States. So we see the laws are changing in the United States. And how do we respond to these very stringent laws that the United States is imposing on Caribbean immigrants? We don't know. We just have to make sure that we do not run afoul of the law. That's one thing we have to do. Make sure that we're clean there in terms of police, history, record, right? That we don't have any confrontation with the law. Okay. And if we do, we have to make sure that we speak to our lawyers to ensure how we can be able to supersede and to bypass these sort of run-ins with the law. And many of us, we know that we are hard workers. Caribbean people tend to be hard workers. So it is going to be hard for them not to listen to Caribbean workers, because, we are deeply enmeshed in the labor market there, in the labor force in the United States. So these are very important matters. What do you think? What do you think would you return home? I'm asking the question, would you return home if your green card application was still pending? Because that is what they're suggesting, that applicants might have to return home. I am thinking that the people who have contracted them, those of you who are working, it means therefore it also depends on them. Do they want to conform to U.S. legal policies, immigration policies, or will they help you to remain? That is also something that will have to be justified. We can't always just say that this is illegal. Will the school or the hospital or the place that you're working for, will they allow you to remain in the United States with this law on the books right now? That is also the question. And will the legal process be able to supersede what Trump has suggested? But let me hear from you. Would you return home if your green card application was still pending? Would you return home, or would you just stay out the process and remain there? Let me know from you what you are. Let me hear from you guys. I wanted to show you this video, but it's just not be able. It's very, very difficult to, and I don't want to go back in again, and then I'm not going to be able to show it to you because it's going to allow people to get out of the live. I don't want to do that because it's too complicated. I don't know why they have changed this sort of. It was very easy to share the screen. Now it's almost very difficult. Every day they change the way in which we can do things here on this platform. Okay, so yeah, so what would you return home if your green card application was still pending? Would you go back home? What would you do if you are in that sort of case, in that situation? What would you do? Would you go home, or would you remain in the United States? As I'm suggesting, the lawyer is saying that the best thing to do is not return home, because if you return home, it is going to complicate the matter. For those of you who are joining, we're talking about Trump's new green card rules could shake the Caribbean forever, right? And I'm asking, would you return home if your green card application was still pending? Would you go back home, or would you remain in the United States? And I'm suggesting that it is best if you remain, because if you leave, then you might not be able to go back. Another thing that we learned this morning is the fact that if you are outside of the United States, it will not affect you. The new rules are not going to affect you. You are going to go through the embassy, that U.S. embassy in your respective country, and they will send, and afterwards the process will move on to the Homeland Security Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and they will take the process from there. So those of you who are living outside of the U.S., you don't have anything to worry about. Those who are already there, that is what you have to begin to think, what's the next step? And what we're suggesting, the next step would be to talk to your lawyer, to an immigration lawyer, to see how you are able to go through the process and to solve this problem. Okay, don't take it on your own and say, I'm staying, right? Consult your lawyers and make sure that they are seeing eye to eye with you, and they perhaps can write a letter or something that you have, consulted with them, and this was the understanding, the legal understanding, because that's the only way that you are going to be able to combat the immigration laws in the United States. Another thing is that make sure that you are not running afoul of the law. Okay, because people who run afoul of the law they will find ways, right? They are going to find ways in which to deport you. Okay, because the Trump administration is seeking to deport as many people as he possibly can. And these are only steps that he's using, methods that he's using to deport people back to their country of origin. So make sure that you are in a proper legal standing. Okay. Now you also need to speak to your bosses on your jobs, right? To find out if whatever institution or organization you're working for, if they are going to comply with Trump's regulations, because that is also another thing. And would you have to change your job? And if you change your job, will you be able to work legally in the United States? Because that is something that is out of whack. Nobody has ever thought about that. The fact that you are being processed, for a green card, nobody said that you had to return to your country of origin. But that's what they're now saying. Now, how will that affect you and even getting another job if your boss on your current job tells you that they are going to follow the stipulations and the rules dictated by the immigration center there in the United States? These are things that we have to now discuss and wonder, how are we going to be able to plow through such a very difficult time? Now, we were suggesting here, would you return home? Let me ask you again, would you return home if your green card application was still pending? And what do you think about the law? Let us hear from you. What do you think about this immigration law that Trump has just implemented or is about to implement? I don't think it's fully implemented yet, but they're considering it, that those who, and it depends on how the lawyers, if they stand up to him and tell him that that is not legal, and it perhaps will have, some sort of repercussions. Okay, so all of that depends, and we pray that they will do that. But we can see that Trump is moving in a direction now where he is trying to bypass legal processes, including Congress. He's not respectful of any laws. He's doing what he wants to do. And we see that the CIA and all of these entities are the ones running the country at the moment. So nothing should surprise us in terms of how the country is now being run. But we have to think about these things, and we cannot now think that we're living in the United States of yesteryear, right? And say that this is going to happen and we're going to be safe and we're going to move on. It doesn't work like that, okay? We have to now think in terms of how do we move forward? And as I was asking in my comments when I introduced the topic, Caribbean leaders now need to think about building our country for Caribbean citizens, because obviously from now on, lots of Caribbean people are going to face very difficult problems in the United States or wherever they are, because we're seeing now that these countries are clamping down as opportunities are now more limited. Then we're going to find that these countries are going to limit the number of people who can remain there. And that is what we have to be able to understand. But let me hear from you. What do you think about the immigration policy? And then we can move on to another topic if this does not really concern you and you're not interested in the topic. What do you think about the immigration policy that we've just spoken about? Do you think that it is of any concern? Do you have family members in the States, including spouses, children, who might be affected by such a problem, such a law that Trump is now planning to implement? All right, let's move on to another topic, okay? Because you seem not to be interested in the immigration topic. But let's move on to another topic, and we're looking at Cuba, right? Cuba is now in the air, right? I'm having some problems here with my computer, so be careful, I might be frozen up sometimes. Cuba is what is happening, a very bad topic now in the news is Cuba, and Cuba is going through a crisis out of proportion. And we're seeing where Trump is now saying that Cuba represents a threat to other governments in terms of national security. And the Cubans, of course, are saying that that is not true. Oh, somebody has responded. Thank you. I have a girlfriend who doesn't have her visa, and I want to marry her. All of this is sending me into a dizzy about what to do. Yeah, so the best thing to do is to go to your lawyer, all right? And I saw Dahlia Walker Huntington, and she's a Jamaican lawyer. I think she is domiciled in Florida. She tends to give very, very good advice. So if I were you, I would get in touch with Dahlia Walker Huntington, and she would perhaps will be able to advise you on that topic in terms of what is best to do? How do you go about that as far as the US laws are now concerned? Yeah, so that's what I would do, DPXED. I would not just, listen to my thing, because I'm no lawyer, but Dela, she is a very experienced lawyer and someone who is, very much aware of what is happening, and she keeps abreast of the news, current affairs, and she does also link it to legal matters. So if I were you, I would speak with Dahlia Walker Huntington, right? And she was the one I was trying to get up on my screen for you to listen to, but it's giving me a lot of technical difficulties. I don't know why. So yeah, so that's what I would do. PX. Any other comment on the immigration? Because that's a very good one. That people want to get married, and what do they do in this crisis? Does their spouse rather have to return to their country of origin? We don't know. Okay, I don't know. It's a very mystical rule that Trump is trying to implement at this moment, and people are in fact concerned about their future. But I would also go on TVJ, Television Jamaica, and look at new immigration requirements. And there you'll see Dahlia Walker Huntington, and she definitely has explicated and expounded on some of your concerns, right? And if I were you, and those of you who are in this problem, and you might not feel very courageous to let us know what is happening to you, if you're listening, that you will contact Dahlia Walker Huntington for expert advice on the matter. Okay, any other question or any other comment per the visa restrictions, the green card immigrant, debacle that we find ourselves in right now? Any other comment? Let me see if I can finish reading what some of what the Caribbean newspaper was suggesting here, because here we have some important information too coming from this newspaper from the Caribbean source here. Spokesman Zach Kaler said the administration is returning to the original, let me get this off my screen, is returning to the original intent of the law to ensure aliens navigate our nation's immigration system properly. From now on, an alien who is in the United States temporarily and wants a green card must return to their home country to apply, except in extraordinary circumstances, he said. This policy allows our immigration system to function as the law intended instead of incentivizing loopholes. When aliens apply from their home country, it reduces the need to find and remove those who decide to slip into the shadows and remain in the United States illegally after being denied residency. So they're suggesting here that they're trying to avoid people who might want to exploit the law. So that's why they are making it more stringent. But that's what they always say. They always find some ways of saying that this is what they want to do, or this is the reason why they're doing, they try to make some sort of excuse for their laws. So when aliens apply from their home country, it reduces the need to find and remove those who are illegal. So Zaylor noted that the non-immigrants like students, temporary workers, or people on tourist visas come to the United States for a short time and for a specific purpose, and that the system is designed for them to leave when their visit is over. But I don't see how this applies. I don't see how this applies to what they're doing, because visas, that tourist visas are distinct from, of course, an application for a green card. So they are doing a lot of talking here, and it's not being applied to the green card holders of green card. That I don't understand what they're doing. Their visit should not function as the first step in the green card process, he warned. Following the law allows the majority of these cases to be handled by the State Department at U.S. consular offices abroad, and frees up limited USCIS resources to focus on processing other cases that fall under its purview. The law was written this way for a reason, and despite the fact that it has been ignored for years, Following it will help make our system fairer and more efficient. The new policy directive comes as President Donald Trump, as part of his overall deportation agenda, seeks to strip some Caribbean and other immigrants of their green cards, and in some cases, U.S. citizenship. Right? So this is not just about green card holders. This could also affect people getting their citizenship. Very important that we understand that. And that is how they do it. They do it incrementally, and we have to follow what they're doing. On Thursday, for instance, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that a Cuban national allegedly tied to a top Cuban financial official has been arrested and her lawful permanent resident status or green card terminated at his direction. Now, this is not something that she went through the legal process. He, the Secretary of State, decided that he would cancel her green card. Now, this is something that we have to watch. Right now, where they're not following, she was not sent, right, to the court of law, an immigration specialist, an immigration lawyer. Rubio himself, the Secretary of State, decided to cancel her green card. Rubio, the son of Cuban immigrants residing in Miami, said in a statement that Addis Lastres Morera is now in the custody of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. The U.S. Secretary of State said Morera is the adult sister of Anya Guillermina Lastres Morera, who was sanctioned earlier this month by the State Department for her role as the executive president of GAESA, Grupo de Administración Empresarial, and that is a group, I understand, that runs Cuba, the Cuban military-controlled financial conglomerate. The Trump administration is also seeking to strip the citizenship of a convicted Cuban spy. The U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, said that it has filed a civil denaturalization complaint against Victor Manuel Rocha in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. Now, what's interesting here, are they doing this because of what is happening in Cuba? That is what we have to ask, the questions we need to ask. Are they really, implementing this law because they are, sort of clamping down on the Cubans? Because sometimes they do that, all right? And whatever they're doing in Venezuela or whatever they do in Cuba sometimes can have ripple effects in other countries and their immigrants. Very important. Make sure you're liking the live and you're sharing the live with as many people on the platform, right? Under no circumstances should an agent of a foreign adversary be permitted to hold the title of American citizen, said Assistant Attorney General Brett Shumate. Let me repeat this. Under no circumstances should an agent of a foreign adversary, a foreign enemy, as they call it, be permitted to hold the title of American citizen. Our mission is clear: to root out these fraudsters and preserve the sanctity of naturalization process for those who adhere to our laws. Now, that's interesting. So you're suggesting here, what they're suggesting, they can send anybody out. And if they deem any country to be an enemy, they can send their citizens out because they're going to call them agents, right? Any individual who lied during the naturalization process to gain a foothold in this country will be met with the full weight of the Department of Justice, he added. So that's another thing to add. Those of you who are applying for your green card, make sure that you do not lie. Do not lie on your application. If you do, then that also puts you into a thing. Let me listen to another comment, take another comment. I honestly don't care what they want to do. That's what they say. I honestly don't care what they want to do. We should enact laws of reciprocity always. Anyone that comes to our countries where we need a visa to visit theirs must get a visa. Also deport persons from those countries. Easier said than done, because remember now that our politicians are not the ones running the country. And that is why they have nothing to say. Notice that they have nothing to say. These Caribbean countries have nothing to say because they know that they don't have that sort of right. They don't have that power. They don't have the authority. And they themselves want to maintain their visas. Remember now, our politicians find themselves in a similar plight, right? If they go against US laws, they can end up losing their visas, and they're not going to lose their visas for any of us, will they? Now, whoever stay in our Caribbean islands in, is it Skin here in Sync? There are hundreds, if not thousands of YouTube what is YT? Illegal occupiers, right? There are. And you see, the thing about it is that they have the stick and we are the ones who have the handle, right? Or we have to grab they are the ones who have the stick. Some years ago, they allowed people who overstayed their visa to apply and to remain in USA while their green card application was pending. Right, that was the norm. This was the norm in former times. This was what they used to do. But for some reason, Trump is now suggesting that it has to change, or they're saying that the rule was not what they were doing in former times. They were not following the law, but now he is, according to him and his administration, they're now following the law. That was like 15 years ago. Yes. Things are changing rapidly. White skin. Oh, you mean white skin? I understand, So white skin send kits and the Nevis. I got you. I got what you're saying now. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You see, the laws that apply to Caribbean people and Americans who live in these other countries are just two different laws, and lots of it is because the way how our leaders have governed us, and we are the ones who are like slave states, so they treat us as their slaves, and that's why you're not hearing any politicians speaking out against what is happening. They're not going to speak out against what is happening. The DOJ said the U.S. seeks an order revoking Rocha's naturalization based on his admission in criminal proceedings that he began spying for Cuba in 1973 before he naturalized in 1978. So these people are going way back into history. Right? And this is how they're operating. Notice that they are now trying to indict Raul Castro, and that's for something that he had done from 1996 or 1997. So this is to show you that the U.S. has a way, and that's why we cannot lie whatever we're doing in the United States. And if you also have run afoul of any law, if you are listening to me now, or you know of any family members who have been, they've run in some problem with the law, which is American law, they need to consult with a lawyer now and let the lawyer know exactly what happened and how they can work around it, because the United States has a way of saying, well, Mr. Tucker, you have to leave because 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you were involved in such foul, you ran afoul of the law, and you have to go, and they will not take you back in. So make sure that whatever we do, we are living a clean life as far as the law is concerned. When he applied for naturalization, Rocha represented under penalty of perjury that he had not committed crimes for which he had not been arrested. He was not affiliated with the Communist Party of Cuba. He had not advocated, believed in, or knowingly supported and furthered the interests of communism. And he believed in the U.S. Constitution and the form of government of the U.S., the DOJ said. None of these were true. So they're going way back into his history and suggesting that he was an agent. In 2023, the DOJ said Rocha was charged with several counts related to spying for Cuba and passport fraud. In April 2024, the DOJ said that Rocha admitted that starting in or around 1973, he secretly, 1973 guys, he secretly supported the Republic of Cuba and its clandestine intelligence gathering mission against the US by serving as a covert agent of Cuba's intelligence services. So what if they were to accuse us, you and I, of being involved in any government, whether in your home country or another foreign government, of being agents, which they can? then they can deport us. They can deport us. So they're not only looking at what we did maybe 3 years ago, but what you did probably 50 years ago. The DOJ said Rocha pleaded guilty and was convicted of conspiracy to act as an agent of a foreign government and defraud the United States and acting as an illegal agent of a foreign government. He was sentenced to and is serving a 15-year sentence, the DOJ said. It said the U.S. will bring even independent counts seeking the revocation of Rocha's U.S. citizenship. So here is a naturalized citizen his citizenship is being revoked. Meanwhile, Caribbean immigration advocates have condemned a proposal by the Trump administration in enforcing the Internal Review Service of the IRS to identify the immigration status of Caribbean and other taxpayers. So those of us who are also in problem with paying our taxes, our visas can also be revoked. All right, so they're trying to prevent Trump from using the IRS also to convict us, to indict us. NYIC said the proposed changes would directly affect undocumented Caribbean and other immigrants who use an individual taxpayer identification number, the ITIN, a 9-digit number issued to people who are not eligible for a Social Security number but still file and pay taxes in the United States. Every New Yorker deserves to feel safe contributing to their economy and trust that paying taxes will not place them or their families at risk. So this is something they're now using every weapon that they can find, every weapon in the Trump administration that he can find to indict people, to deport them. That is what he is currently doing. So we also have to make sure that our taxes that we file yearly are up to date, and there's no shenanigans and any deceits, because all of these can be used against us. Now, these are also systems of fair. I don't think it's going to happen to everybody, right? They're trying to, to sort of imbibe fair in the community. However, it doesn't mean that one of us or some of us cannot be indicted. That is what. So you and I don't know if our names will be called. And if our names are called, we have to ensure that we have not run afoul of the law. Right? That is what we have to do at the moment. But what do you think? How do you think Caribbean governments could help to resolve this issue? Do you think they have any? Well, I said they have none, but what do you think? Let me hear from you. What do you think our governments can do to fight against what Trump is actually doing here? What do you think they can do? Any suggestion or any thoughts? How can the Caribbean governments fight what is happening with this Trump policy? Do you think they can fight? I doubt it. I doubt it. I doubt they can do any fighting, right? I doubt they can fight. All right, let's look at Cuba. We're going to now segue into Cuba and what is happening there. There's a crisis there in Cuba. We can see where the United States is suggesting that Cuba poses a threat to other governments. Fazli saying, let us look at what, I am not sure that you can reason with Trump. Yeah, there's no reasoning with him, right? There's no reasoning with Trump and the Trump administration by extension. There's no reasoning with any of them. They just do what they think they want to do. And no matter what we say or what we do, that is what it is. Their reality is their reality, right? So even if Cuba is not a threat to any other government, if Trump says that Cuba is a threat, then Cuba is a threat, right? If Iran is not a threat to any other government, if Trump and the administration say that Iran is a threat, then it is a threat. And this is a dangerous precedent to walk on, because what it's creating essentially, you and I, who might be innocent of something, if the state should charge us of something, a crime that we have never committed, it means therefore that that is what counts, not what the reality is, right? And that's what we have to be watching. Let's look at another comment. Doubt they can fight, but they can be strategic. just future possibilities. We are too docile as a people in general, and our politicians are even worse. Yeah, but we can say that, but the United States citizens are also docile. Look at what Trump is doing in a country of over 350 million now, if not more, right? In a country of over 350 million people, they can't do anything to what Trump is doing. They're just slaves there looking on and doing some protests here and there. But there's nothing, it seems, that United States citizens can do to against what Trump is doing to them and also in the world at large. Because what is evidently clear here is that soon as they move from the permanent residents, the green card holders, they are going to move to citizens. And that is what they are now even debating. And that's why Trump, when he came to power, he was suggesting that even American citizens can be deported to third countries. And he was thinking of even deporting prisoners. And you know who comprised the prison system in America for the most part? Black people, right? People of color. That he can deport them to third countries, which he's going to do, which he's planning on doing. And that these are the laws now that he's building step by step, brick by brick, until he gets to people who are citizens themselves. So today is green card holders, and tomorrow is going to be naturalized citizens, and then citizens who are born there. Thazi is saying, correct, the Americans are just as slave-minded, and they're just as powerless, Thazi. They have been protesting, though, but that is a complete waste of time. Absolutely. It's a complete waste of time. Because the more they protest is the more they send ICE and all these, terrible police people to go and suppress them, make laws that suppress further protest actions. It means, therefore, that the state is more powerful than the citizens themselves. The state is now more powerful than the citizens themselves. And that is where you find now fascism. The United States is not the country of yesteryear, right? It has never been a fully democratic society, but it was better. And it sort of, even though it was hypocritical, it sort of pretended as if it were following the laws of the nation, the Constitution. Now they're not following it, and they don't care. And they're saying, citizens, what can you do? You can do nothing. Okay? Now, Fazi is saying, yes, Trump will eventually get to the citizens born there. He said it. And I think that one of the things we have to give him credit for, he says what he's going to do, even on the campaign trail and when he got into the presidency. And remember, as he started, without even a few days into his presidency, right? He was saying that he was already going to deport people, including American citizens, to third countries such as El Salvador. And in fact, some of the countries in the Caribbean have also signed on, including the Dominican Republic, have signed on to his immigration policies of being a third country. So if you are a U.S. citizen and they think that you have run afoul of the law, or if they think that you are secretly involved with some foreign government and spying on the U.S. or its government, it means, therefore, that you can be deported. You can be deported. So the law is now moving. The law is now a shackle, as it were. Right? The law is not what it is supposed to be. And many of us are just looking at we're reacting to what Trump is doing, but we're not realizing that the root of the whole system, Trump is not just a symptom. He's not the root. He's not the root. And if Kamala comes in tomorrow, it's going to be something else that you have to deal with. Okay? Yeah, we have here saying here, yes, Trump will event. Why am I not seeing your comment here? Sorry, I'm trying to pull up your comment. Okay, give me a second. It's coming up. Yeah, my computer is a bit slow today. Yeah, yes, he says, yes, I tell persons I think I like Trump for he speaks his mind and says what he's doing or what he's going to do, unlike the fake Dems and other political tools. Absolutely. Absolutely. They don't tell you what they're going to do. And they are just reacting to his policies now. And then when they come back in power, when the Dems come back in power, they are going to do something else that is going to uproot Caribbean citizens there too. Okay? And that is how it works. The yin and the yang, they are just reacting to what he's doing. And then when they come into power, there's nothing different that they are going to do. Okay? So what is the root cause of the problem? The United States wants to be an uncontrollable empire. For all these years, it has been acting like a controlled empire, one that says it's a republic, but it's not a republic. One says it's an empire, but, we are still a republic. And it was going back and forth, but now it says, we are who we are. It's almost like it was in the closet. The empire was in the closet, and the empire is now coming out of the closet and telling us that I am an empire. And if you don't like it, then leave. That's exactly what the United States of America is doing right now. And Trump is only a symptom. He is only the face of the empire. He is not the underlying problem. And I can tell you that. And those of you who are spending all your energy into Trump and Trump and Trump and Trump, you are going to find that when you wake up, you're going to see one worse than Trump is on its way, whether it's going to be democratically elected or elected through, through dictatorship, right? Or it's that person aligned with the Democratic Party or aligned with the Republican Party. These presidents are not the root cause of the problems the U.S. is currently facing, right? They are just symptoms, and they were sent there. And by the way, they didn't even choose themselves. They were chosen by more powerful forces behind the scenes. Very important that you understand that. I was listening to a video last night, and it was done by this African, I don't know if those of you are watching him. What's his name again? His name is Gabriel, and he's from Angola. Gabriel, and the surname, I'm just not remember the surname. Gabriel. Okay, when I remember it, I'll tell you. But he was talking about the fact that he was a Satanist, right? And he was involved in a lot of these secret societies. He was like a top guy in his country, chief of an African tribe. And he was way up in the secret societies. And he suggested that a lot of times in these international organizations, the evil spirits meet with them and they tell them what they need to do. And he was a part of a system in which he would propagate wars, cause wars to happen. And that whenever they meet, that's all they plan for, wars and killing. Right? So sometimes when we look at our leaders and we think that they're ordinary beings, they're not. And they're being controlled by higher forces than you and I can even imagine. Let's look at what Fazi is saying here. We have America came like a beast, a lamb rather, right? And speaks like a dragon. It's now showing its dragon nature, absolutely. And remember, the Bible's description was very, very clear. It's lamb-like. For years, I thought it was a lamb. It was never a lamb, right? It was behaving like one. But to behave like something doesn't mean that you are the person, right? Just like somebody say, a man behaving like a woman or a woman behaving like a man doesn't mean that the person is a man or a woman. Just behaving like. So this lamb-like beast of the United States behaved like a lamb, but she was always a dragon, right? Always a dragon. Slavery, segregation, right? The civil rights, not wanting to give, Black people of color civil rights, right? And all of the wars after World War II and even before. If you read the history of the United States and you look at what the United States did in the Philippines, right, in the 19th century and other countries, you realize that the United States was never a democratic country. Well, beginning with slavery, and you'll see that, right? Never. But people believed it, right? And I'm not suggesting now that it has not done some great things. Thanks to the Constitution, it has done some great things. But we must understand that whatever good things and good qualities it had will not last forever. And some of us are still thinking that this is going to be happening forever, but it's not going to happen forever. Okay, it's going to end one of these days. All right, and that is what we have to understand. Okay, so let's now look at what is happening. We're saying in Cuba, we're seeing lots of things happening there, and the governments are, the US is saying that Cuba represents a threat to national security and also to the security of other governments. Okay, so that is something that we have to be watching and to be watching closely. Why? Why is the United States going after Raul Castro after so many years? Why? Why is the United States deciding to go after Raul Castro? Something that we have to look closely at and to examine. But today, the Reuters newspaper, I'm trying to have this pulled up so I can get it onto my screen. The Reuters newspaper, says Cuba looks to Vatican for help to ease U.S. oil embargo, Washington Post reports. Now, this is the Washington Post reporting that, and this was reported on March 27, 2026. Cuban officials have petitioned the Vatican to help persuade the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump to ease its oil embargo in senior level meetings with Vatican officials, including Pope Leo XIV. The Washington Post reported on Friday, citing people familiar with the matter. Reuters could not immediately verify the report. The Vatican press office, the White House, and the Cuban government did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So the Cuban officials are actually hiding the fact that they're asking the Vatican for help in navigating or maneuvering through this very difficult moment. Havana and Washington entered talks earlier this month as an oil blockade imposed by Trump pushes the communist-run nation deeper into economic crisis. Reports had suggested the Trump administration was seeking to remove Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel from power. Right? So we're seeing here the same playbook is right now being used in Cuba that they used in Venezuela. Right? The same playbook. Now, why is Washington using the same playbook? Now, these are also two heavily Catholic-run countries, Venezuela and Cuba, right? And now we're seeing, before Maduro was captured, the Vatican was working with the United States to sort of, lesser the whatever conflict that they were having. That didn't work out. We saw what happened. The United States went down to Venezuela and captured the president and his wife, who are, by the way, the media are just mum on that now. They're not telling us, they're not reminding us that Maduro was captured in January with his wife, and they're now also in court. They have been indicted. Now they're doing the same thing to Cuba, and I hear people talking all sort of nonsense. Oh, it's not going to happen, and Russia is going to help, and China is going to help, and whoever is going to help, right? And then the same thing happens, the same playbook. And it happens again, and people will go back into their lack of knowledge, and they will say the same thing, right? But what we're seeing happening in Cuba right now is the same playbook that was used in Venezuela. Now, why do I say that? Because it's all a smoke screen. It's all a smoke screen. What we're seeing in the media, for the most part, is not real. Is not real. Behind the scenes, there are other things happening with these governmental systems that we have to be mindful of, be vigilant of, and understand that our world is not the world that we think it is. It is just not a real world. It's an artificial world. And it's a world in which many forces are trying to gain supremacy of the world. Right? Many forces. And let me just say to you, no government system in the world now wants to live in peace. Whether it's China or it's Russia or it is the United States, they might have different methods, go about it in a different way, and you might think that they do, but none of them in this world want to have peace. And we say that, look at the other day we talk about, we hear the United States talking about peace, right? With Iran, the peace deal. And then suddenly they're striking Iran, right? So while you're brokering a peace deal, brokering this peace deal, then you're actually striking the country. Now, what peace deal is that? What peace deal is that? The other day, Trump went to China to speak with Xi Jinping. And Xi was suggesting that he's on board with whatever plan he has for Iran, that Iran should not have any, what you call it now, nuclear weapons, right? That is what Xi agreed with him on. Then after Trump left, and you saw, I mean, hardly had he left, then you saw, and afterwards you saw Putin heading to China, right? And then you had all of these presidents going up, and you think that with the media studying all this nonsense, and you hear these military guys coming and and Russia is doing this, and China is doing this. And at the end of the day, what we're seeing is the consolidation of powers. All right? That's what we're seeing. And many of you have not yet begun to see that. You're still clinging to the fact that some power is going to control what is happening in the world, and then we are going to be ushered into a world of peace. And that is not going to happen. Because all of these powers, people love power. Whether it's you or it's me, right? People tend to love power. And when they have power in their hands, whether economic, military, political, all right, religious, they are not going to give it up. And they want to really enforce it, because that is the human nature. That's how we are as a people, right? We like to wield power over humanity. Okay, so don't believe that what you're seeing about the, all of these things happening in the media. Now, we're hearing that there are students in Cuba, all right? There are students in Cuba right now as we speak, and they are having problems. They're having problems with remaining there. So they're asking for help from their respective governments, right? So the people who live in Cuba, the Jamaican paper is saying here, harsh reality, Jamaican medical students in Cuba plead for help amid deepening crisis, right? So despite Havana's reported assurances of normalcy, a crippling infrastructure collapse has left Jamaican medical students in Cuba facing severe hardships, including the reduction in teaching sessions, threatening both their career, training, and mental health. So they want to go back home. The students, four of whom spoke to the Gleaner on condition of anonymity, fearing academic reprisal. Why would they want to, punish the students for talking, are urging the Jamaican government to intervene and demand transparency from Cuban authorities, who they say gave assurances concerning their academic programs, but are not completing them. One final year student said that the nationwide fuel shortage has forced the reduction of classes to between 1 and 3 days per week, and that the clinical instruction at hospitals is virtually non-existent. So this is actually affecting their training. Frustrated, the student said he and peers continue to pay full tuition fees despite receiving little to no practical training or structured education. He said daily life has deteriorated with extreme electrical outages, leaving them with only 4 hours of power each day, coupled with rising transportation costs, unreliable services, and frequent internet and communication blackouts. He said among the medical students, there is a strong feeling of abandonment as the Jamaican government and embassy appear to passively accept the Cuban authorities' assurances without adequate scrutiny or real-time verification. Since earlier this year, the Cuban government assured our government and embassy that classes for international medical students would resume normally and that there would be no need for students to leave the country, the student said. However, the reality on the ground has become increasingly concerning, far more concerning since January and February. Due to the severe fuel shortage affecting transportation nationwide, students are now attending classes only 1 to 3 days per week. Even during those limited days at the hospital, meaningful academic instruction is often non-existent. In many cases, students simply sign an attendance sheet and are then sent home shortly afterward. Interns face similar conditions, sometimes reporting for extended shifts only once per week with minimal educational or clinical engagement, he added, lamenting the continued payment of tuition. So here we're seeing where the students who went there thinking that they were going to be well trained and have their classes, right, are not able to do so because of what is happening with Trump policy and Cuba. And the authorities, both in Jamaica or in the Caribbean and in Cuba, are not willing for the students' concerns to be aired. All right? They are not willing for the students' concern to be aired. It's one thing to say that you are a victim, which we are saying Cuba is a victim of US policy. Another thing is to allow the students to speak, because this is their reality. And then you can say, well, if the US does this or does that, then you'll be able to do that. But neither authorities, the Caribbean authorities nor the Cuban authorities, are willing for the students to vent and to explain publicly, to reveal publicly what is happening to them in Cuba, right? Now, if that is not concerning to you, if you think our governments are acting by transparency, and only when you have to deal with them do you understand that they're not better, right? And we have to begin now to look beyond what is good and what versus evil in politics. In politics, there's no good versus evil. You can talk about that in religion, but not in politics. It is evil versus evil. That is what you have to understand. And if you want to argue which one is more evil, then that is for you, because to me, evil is evil. But perhaps you want to go beyond that and say, who is more evil than whom? Then that is another conversation. But when we're talking about politics, it's evil versus evil, right? And what we're seeing happening in Cuba is having the deleterious effect on our Caribbean students. Okay, we cannot avoid that, and the Caribbean governments are avoiding that, right? Everything now is political, and it depends on what political ideology that we subscribe to. That is where we're going to turn a blind eye, move on, because we know that Cuba is the victim and that everything is the United States is the aggressor. And the United States by far is an aggressor. Nobody can debate that, right? But we cannot also look at what maybe the shortcomings of the Cuban Revolution, the shortcomings of the Castros and the Canels regime. We have to look at these things also in a very textured and balanced way. And many of us don't want to do that. And that is why our countries are moving into full dictatorship. Because if we don't understand the root causes of what is happening in the political world, then we are going to be deceived and be exploited. Okay, and that is the fundamental message, the underlying message that I have been shouting for a very long time, right? That we have to open up our eyes now. We cannot begin to think that this is just American, this is just Cuban, this is just Jamaican. We've got to look at root causes, and many of us are ignorant of the root causes of the problems that afflict modern society. Faze is saying, let me get to the comments now, because that is what I'm here for, to have you comment. I want to hear from more people too, so we can, and share the live, like the live, share it, so we can have very, discussion, very good, innovating and lively discussion, scintillating, I should say. My issue with the Cuban government is, why put your people through the system of government knowing how the Cuban people suffer? And that is what people have been asking. Because it's one thing to say we're suffering too. Let us be clear on that. Those of us in Jamaica, those in Barbados, Trinidad, but what more suffering? The Cuban people are suffering more, right? And that's what we're saying. We're not saying that you cannot fight. But at the same time, when you actually fight, what are the consequences? It's almost like, okay, you and I are going up for PhDs, right? Let me just be clear now. We're going up for our PhDs. And we know that when you're going up for your PhD and you have to write your dissertation, right? A lot of times your thesis advisor, your dissertation advisor, they are not the nicest of people. And they want to suppress you and to, suppress whatever idea you have. At the same time, if you want your degree, are you going to fight with the advisor and tell him that or her that he's oppressive or he's oppressive? Or are you going to skillfully maneuver your way through? I'm not saying you're going to become now a slave, but you have to skillfully maneuver your way through that system so that you can end up with your degree. Either you're going to get it or you're not going to get it. So you suffer the consequences. And that's what I think. Trevor is saying, very good day. Wow, good afternoon, Trevor. Good day. Good morning. It's not today. It's good afternoon. I did not expect to see you live so early. Yes, I'm trying it because the algorithm is not sending out the videos, whatever. So these are just experiments. I'm just experimenting with the algorithm. Yes, everything is indeed political in these times. It is. It is. It is. It is political, from religion to politics. Well, politics is politics. Economics, everything that we debate is political, and I think that people are so much tied to their ideology, to one ideology. We, as Mr. Pereira said, we have to have an ideology, but we are tied to one ideology, to an ideology that is going to affect, and no matter what is happening, and what we're seeing, that the ideology that we're clinging to is not really real, right? We don't care. We want to continue to embrace that ideology. WH is saying the Vatican is supporting this abuse of Cuba by USA. They are. And this is the conundrum, right? How is it that the Vatican pretends as if it is trying to mediate the whatever peace agreement or between the US and Trump and the US and Cuba, US and Cuba, while they are also undermining the Cuban regime? But the Vatican has always done that. It has always played that double-faced, distort and given us distorted view of what it is doing. You never know what the Vatican is doing. Always remember, when you see the Pope coming out and telling you, and we need to be moral agents of truth and all of these things. The Vatican has never been, I should say, an agent of moral truth. They are liars and they're evil. People believe that the US mainstream media, right, Trump is the cause of everything bad, and people choose not to see they are being led to support the coming rulership, even if it is the devil himself. Absolutely. That's what they don't understand. And what they're doing, Trevor, is that they're saying Trump is so bad and he's going to be terrible. And Trump is terrible. We have to admit that, right? We're not saying here, no, Trump is not an evil guy and he's not terrible with the policies that he's implementing. He is, in fact. However, what we're saying is that don't just look at him, look at the system and how his predecessors actually helped him to get into power and to wield that influence over us. And as he begins to wield that influence, another guy is going to come, another man or woman, that is going to be way more worse than Trump, that you're going to be saying, my God, Trump was like a saint, right? But that's what they're doing. They're conditioning us. And then they are making us believe that one side is better than the other. And then when we're brainwashed now, another one comes, and then we find ourselves in deep crisis. And he's right. Just like the Vatican and Pope support slavery, right? And they pretend as if they never did. And they also they're wealthy because of what happened during slavery. And we have here the Vatican Pope is the religious arm of the same white supremacy system. They are. The Vatican, as we said here, and the Vatican writer, Manhattan, right? He did say, Avram Manhattan said that there is nothing in the world that happens that the Vatican is not involved in. Nothing. So you can think the war that is happening in the Middle East is just by two entities, United States and Iran, and not understanding that the Vatican stands at the helm of everything happening there. All right? And he's using these powers that be, right, both in Iran and the United States, to control to usher in its agenda. And its agenda is to control the entire world. The entire world from corner to corner. Okay? And I was trying to remember the guy. I think his name is Gabriel. Oh Lord, I'm not remembering his. Oh, Estevao. I want you guys to go and let me write the name. Gabriel Estevao. And he is Portuguese speaking, but he speaks, some English, and he does express himself fairly well in English. And he talks about the fact that he was a former Satanist, right? And he used to attend meetings with some of these very powerful people, right? And thankfully, he was able to get, released from that sort of system of enslavement, because that is what the devil does to you. He gives you things, and then he enslaves you. Okay, so that is true. Trevor is saying, so go and listen to some of those videos. I just put it in the chat by Gabriel Estevao. Correct. People just want something to blame so they won't take responsibility. But like regular politics, we are to believe we were saved and needed the new tyrant to save us. Absolutely. And Trump is going to be, we're going to find very shortly that Trump was a saint in comparison to the person who is coming next. Okay? Because if we look at the system, it's getting more fascistic president after president. All right? So we had George W. Bush, all right? And people thought that the United States was collapsing, was going under the toilet. And then we heard that Obama, this black guy was going to come to save us, and he believed in the law. In fact, he was a constitutionalist, right? He was a constitutional professor at the University of Chicago. And people thought about him and said, wow, he sounded nice and he was eloquent, right? And we thought he was going to steer the United States into the right direction, away from wars and usher in a time of peace. And people did not realize that. And when Obama was going up for power, I told them, people did not want to hear, they don't want to listen, that the Vatican also controlled him. And what he was doing, his activism in Chicago, was fake. And now the people in Chicago, particularly the black people in Chicago, are waking up to see that. Whatever he was doing in Chicago was absolutely fake to deceive them. Right? Anyway, people voted him twice. Great guy, right? What did he do? In fact, the immigration laws that we're seeing Trump imposing now, a lot of them were under him, right? But we weren't following because we were too much captured by his charisma and the fact that he sounded presidential. He looked presidential, sounded presidential, and to add, more whatever, he's black. Wow, he's black. The first African-American president, the first black president. And we still will not learn our lessons that the color of your skin, being African or Jamaican or Trinidadian, does not matter. In a system that is deeply corrupt and controlled, we'll not learn our lesson. Oh, Traore, and you're looking at Traore to be the next savior. And he's going to come and you're going to find out that he's not going to be the savior. And then you're going to cry. But we're slaves. Then we have Motley is cosplaying as Captain Planet, right? And CARICOM as a whole has proven how truly independent and weak they are when it comes to Cuba, Venezuela, COVID, and more. Globalists and globalist puppets. Absolutely. Right? They come in different forms. Right? But you have to be able to look at them and say, no, it's the same clothes. Different colors, different shapes, different patterns, different textiles, but it's the same clothes that they're wearing. They have to wear clothes, right? And they're clothing themselves in a way that you cannot detect because you love to hear the propaganda. And people are hearing the reactions to, oh, what is happening in Parliament, or who is saying what. And these things don't want to help you. because the parliament is not even representing you. Right? What happens in Jamaican Parliament or US Congress is not really helping you. Well, we can look at the laws. Let's look at the laws that they're making. Because what they're doing and saying, just drama they're adding. And for you to consume, and then they are making laws that you're not looking at, and then you are going to be enmeshed by these laws that will destroy you and your children and your children's children. Right? That's what is happening. So we have to wake up. We've got to wake up. And I think that we're still sleeping. And we think that we're living a normal world, and what we see is what we get. What you see is not what you get. In fact, what you're seeing is just a total lie. It's drama. It's theater, it's circus. And you love it, because that is how we have been conditioned for circus, for sports. Right? And we think we are in a sports game where Trump is going to win or he's going to lose, and Iran is going to be the victor. Right? You have to wake up. You've got to wake up. Okay? Now, let's look at some. The other day we are talking about police brutality, and that is becoming a problem in the Caribbean, right? Police brutality. I'm hearing it in Trinidad, in Barbados, but Trinidad more specifically, we're seeing where the police brutality is getting out of hand. In Jamaica is a big problem too, right? And recently we heard of a brutal killing by the police of this lady who was, who seemed to have disobeyed the laws too, but the way in which she was murdered is questionable. Right? And we have to. But this morning we're waking up to the Trinidad Guardian, who is saying that PM posts praise and blessings for law enforcement officers. That's what the Trinidad Guardian is saying today. So she's, in spite of the fact that people are concerned about police brutality in Trinidad and Tobago, Prime Minister Person Cesar is suggesting yesterday that he continued to heap praise on this country's law enforcement officials, even as criticisms mount following the fatal police-involved shooting of Joshua Samaru. Emotions have been high after news broke last Thursday that Samaru's partner, Kaya Sealy, is facing charges including manslaughter arising out of January 20th encounter with police. In a post on her social media platforms yesterday, she stated, "God bless our law enforcement officers." In the post, she attached a video of news reports on the court appearance of relatives of opposition leader Penelope Beckles back in 2014. So she's praising the police officers, right? While the country is saying something is wrong. Something is wrong and it needs to be remedied. Let us listen to what Trevor is saying. Allow me to remind you, he was the first Black president when running, and his first term, but in the second one, he was biracial, right? Right. This is a very good, and continues to be biracial, right? He paved most of the social changes we see now. Absolutely. He set the standard, right? Obama has never been a lover of African Americans and the culture. Well, he claims to love the jazz and whatever, okay? But so do white people, because Black Americans have always entertained Americans in general, right? But if you read a book that was written by his campaign manager, forgot his name now, but in that book, the writer, the author suggested that when Obama was at Harvard University, that he was never, the Black Americans said that the ones who went to Harvard said that he never came and was not around them. He wasn't fond of them, right? He would call to them, but he was mostly around his white colleagues, right? He didn't see them at his level. Okay, so when they were craving for him, and these, the sad thing about it, Trevor, is that this information was out even before he was elected the first time. right? And people spoke about it. We saw how he treated his pastor, Pastor Wright, Jeremiah Wright, whatever his name was, and he distanced himself from him when it didn't serve his purpose, when his pastor did not serve his purpose. He distanced himself from the pastor. But people did not want to look at these things. They were more carried away by what others were doing and environment, right? Because, black people don't like to read, right? Black people just don't like to read. We like to gossip, right? We like to gossip. We like to react to the gossips, but we don't like to read. And that's going to destroy us. The Bible even said it. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And lack of knowledge means that we don't read. We don't try to learn something new every day. There are outsiders starving Cuba, but we have fools stating communism not working. Right. Why have it, Why keep the people under such a system? And people don't even know if it's communist. As some people say, it's not even a communist system. But, what is it, It's an oppressive system, whatever you call it, right? We know that it is an oppressive system, a system that just does not work, right? It does not. What are you proving? What are you proving? And that is what people need to ask. Because they're not winning the battle. They're not winning. They're not winning the game. So why have the people under that? You're not winning. Stop it. Police are paid, gangsters justified, supplied, and glorified by the government. Absolutely. And we are moving now into a century because, and lots of U.S. writers have been complaining about U.S. police brutality, that the army is now merged with the police. So what we have now are not police officers, We have militarized, that's the word. We have a militarized police force, right? So the police have been militarized. And when you talk to members of the military, they are what? They are there to shoot, to kill. The army officials, the military, they are primarily trained to shoot, to kill. So when we're seeing the police officers, for example, the other day when in Montego Bay in Jamaica, right? In Montego Bay in Jamaica, a lady, because, she did not comply with the police requests and had started to move off her car, and the police shot the car and shot her, killing her. And even after they knew that she was injured, I think before she died, they were dragging her on the floor to put her into their car, their vehicle, right? And she died. They didn't care that she was injured and that they didn't have to drag her in the way that they dragged her. But of course, their intent must have been to kill her, right? And this is what we have to understand. Wherever we see our police officers right now, they're not upholding the law, as Trevor is suggesting here. They are a militarized force. And that is how we know we're heading into a fascistic government. When we have the police officers doing whatever they want to do. And then we heard Andrew Holness yesterday talking about the fact that, he's going to tell them that they need to respect the laws, right? Now, at the same time, we are also at the other side of the extreme as citizens. We also must learn to obey the laws. For example, I don't know about the other Caribbean countries, but I know that Jamaica is an awfully disorderly and lawless country. People just don't like to obey the laws. So if we become lawless citizens too, which is the other side of the extreme, right? And they handle us in the way that they do, then we are also guilty. We, on the other end, must ensure that we obey the laws of the land as much as we can. And some of them might not be the ones that we agree with. There are lots of laws that you and I don't agree with. But until we try to find a way to legally deal with it and so that it can be changed, right? We cannot then say, I'm going to disobey the law. And this is what many of us are doing. And it is sad. And we're dying like flies in the Caribbean right now. Communism not starving Cuba, it is outsiders starving Cuba. Well, that is, the fact of the matter is that that is how we describe it, WHC, that it is not it is Cuba is a victim and she's not the one starving. What we're suggesting here is that whatever is starving, because we know that the politicians are not starving, right? The leaders are not starving. That is for sure. Because if they were starving, they would have ended it, whatever ideology that they're under. Okay? The people are the victims, while the politicians are the ones who are they get away and they look very healthy and well, at least when they talk in the media. When you look at the typical Cuban, they don't look at the leaders. The leaders look quite well taken care of because they're getting their food. China is the biggest communist country and they are not starving. Well, China is actually a capitalist nation, by the way. It's not communist in any sense. It's communist in terms of its social policies, but it is capitalist in terms of its economic policies. Let's get that clear, right? China is not operating in Cold War policy era at all, right? That is what we have to understand. Thazi is saying, I got turned off from Obama when he threw his grandmother and pastor under the bus. Yes, he did. And he'll throw anybody under the bus if they don't serve his purpose. They don't like to read. They like being entertained, right? Hence, the push for watching content and monetizing content creators. It's all paid propaganda and mind control. That's what it's all about. And people don't know that, including some of the redacted and some of the very intelligent ones that we listen to. It's all about the fear and the, everything that Clayton says is gospel, right? And you don't know it's mind control. Tucker Carlson's and all these people, they know how to frame it, and the algorithm pushes their content, right? Because they know that it's all about fear, and if you're held in fear, then that is how you're easily controlled. But are they talking about the root cause of the system? No, they won't do that. Do they know? I don't know. Now, we have here Trevor saying, even in Barbados, they are merging the army and the police, and they have defunded or stopped altogether most rehab programs for the prisoners, and the prison is turning into what you see in America, compounding the gangs. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. And these are the root causes. And people are going to say, oh, well, the police need to do that. Well, are you looking at the root cause? That their agenda, they have merged the police with the army, with the military, and that more abuse is going to continue unabated. And there's nothing you and I can do unless we tell them to stop it. And that we are aware that they're merging the police force with the military. But we don't want to hear that. We just think that it's going to change. And if we cry and we protest, it's going to change. It's not going to happen that way. Okay? But don't you think if we obey all laws, we will be like China, suffer the consequences of compliance? Yeah, and I like that question. You're right. But if we are going to disobey the laws, we have to go about it in a very intelligent way, right? We can't, okay, if the police should ask you for, let's just say I'm having a protest, which you have the right to protest. Don't get me wrong now, but if I go to the protest, what I mean, DPX, and I go to the protest and the police ask me for my passport or my ID, show them or tell them, that I don't have it on me intelligently. But I understand that the lady in Jamaica, she actually took out some, what do you call it? First of all, she was breaking the law because she had on a white plate when she was driving a so-called taxi. So her car in the first place was not a taxi, but she pretended as if it was a taxi. So that was the first red flag that caught the police attention. So we have to obey the law in the sense, if you're riding a taxi, make sure you have the requisite license plate. That's what I'm suggesting. And that's what I suggest by the law, as much as we can. And maybe I shouldn't say we should obey all laws, but as much as we can. And if the laws are not demeaning us, like a proper license plate, that's not demeaning us. If the police ask you intelligently for an ID, if you don't have it, sir, I'm sorry, I don't have it at the moment. But when I think she gave him like a foreign ID, all right, or she moved into her car and started to drive it off, these are things that are going to create friction. And we have to be careful of how we disobey the law. But I agree with you. Some laws might have to be, we should not comply, as you're saying. I believe in non-compliance. But again, in the way how we go about non-complying, right? You can't also approach a police officer cursing him out and calling him all sorts of names, because that is not going to help you. You're just adding fuel to the fire. Right? And that's what I'm saying here. Yeah, so you're right. I don't mean that we should be like slaves and we should not stand up and oppose certain laws, but we should do it intelligently in a way that they cannot say that we were, being unnecessarily non-compliant, if you know what I mean. Then we have here the same country that is starving Cuba is the same country that is financially supporting a genocide. Now, let's be careful now. Let's be careful what we're saying. The situation, the United States policies have compounded what is happening in Cuba, right? They have compounded. We cannot say that that is not. That is a fact. However, Cubans were also starving before that, and they were not necessarily properly fed. Even though we can say, yes, American blockade, but America is just one country in the world, right? Even though we know it's a significant country, but it's just one country in the world. It had before long, even in decades of the 1990s, it had relations with European countries and other countries around the world, right? And when I went to Cuba in 1997, it wasn't a pretty image in terms of what the people were eating, right? And how they had to live. And this was in the 1997. You can say that was the fall of the Soviet Union, and probably it was. But what we have to look at, and the leaders of Cuba should have looked at, is the system working? It might not be working, right? And they might have to sit back and go back to the drawing table to see how it can be improved upon. That's my, we can't just do the same, recycle the same system and expect it to work. We're not living in the 1960s now. And many of our countries, including Jamaica, that's what we're doing. That is why people suffer in Jamaica too. Because the same recycled policies that they do over and over, and nobody's going back to the drawing board and say, that is not working. We need a better system. We need better policies. We need more effective policies. And this is what I'm suggesting here. Barbados also passed a law, or debating a law, anti-gang, which gives the police similar protections as Jamaica. Yeah, Jamaica is going to be now, by the way, Jamaica is going to be the blueprint. I did a video, I told you. Jamaica is now the blueprint. In fact, Jamaica is getting its law, its strategies from El Salvador. Right? Do you know El Salvador and what they did to have brought down their murder rate to, very low levels? That is whom Andrew Holness is actually following. All right. Jamaica is always the one who starts out with the experiments, and then the other Caribbean territories follow. All right. So Jamaica is now the blueprint. All they're saying down there, crime and violence have gone down, but nobody is really, very few people, I shouldn't say nobody, very few people are talking about police brutality and talking about it in an intellectually charged manner. We're all speaking about it in this sort of reactionary manner. So we're not saying that the laws are really reflecting that of what is happening in El Salvador. Because Andrew Holness was, I think he invited some of these people from El Salvador. And they were discussing ways in which they could have adopted some of these police strategies from there. We have here Trevor saying a man was killed in the last few months in Barbados, police custody in a 3-hour span, and no investigation other than he died while the bone of his forehead was caved in. My God, lawyers dared not touch it. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. That the whole system is so rotten that even the legal system seems to be ineffective and paralyzed. All right. Make sure you're sharing the live. The algorithm is not desirous of sharing the live, of distributing. The algorithm is not distributing the video. So you have to share it, like it, and make sure, because the algorithm is intent that the videos will not be shared. So share them so that we can beat the algorithm as much as possible. That's the only way we're going to beat it, by you sharing it and helping to push the algorithm to do what they need to do, which they're not doing. And his family continues to ask for the body. And they're not going to give it to him. You know why? Because if they should have the what do you call these things? The autopsy, right? If they have a proper autopsy, then they're going to report what happened to him. What really happened to him. Okay? So that is where we are now in the stream of things. And I think that we've got to now take a look and say, are we living in a normal society? Are we living in a normal society? And it's not time now for us to say who is right or who is wrong or who is good or who is bad. The system is evil. And what the system is doing, the system wants us to compare and contrast, fight our own people, while our leaders are united in an effort to overthrow any democratic norms and principles that we, the citizens, have fought for. So always look at your leaders. When they have these policies like in Cuba, always look at the leaders. Are they suffering like you? Right? If they're not, the system has to be uprooted. Okay? The system must be uprooted. Now, we have Andrew was also in Turks and Caicos, right? I saw him there a couple weeks ago, meeting and greeting with police officers who are training others, right? Police officers in that country. I read about it. Yeah. So that's what, because Jamaica is the blueprint. Jamaica is the blueprint. So all of you in the Caribbean territories, be prepared. Be prepared, because you're going to see some things happening. And they're not, at this point in time, it's a business too. It's a business. Crime is a business. All right. So they're not going to stop what is happening. They will apologize and they will sound, apologetic. But be warned, it's not about curbing crime. It's about control. Are you seeing my comment above? Yeah, I did. And I just read it. Yeah, and you were right. I saw him there too, and I read what he was doing. If your comments are coming in slowly, I'm reading them. Something is happening. Whatever YouTube is doing is affecting my channel. All right? They're not doing what they're supposed to do. The channel is not operating as it should operate because of the algorithmic control. So make sure you're liking and you're also sharing the videos so that we can beat this algorithmic control by the algorithm. One of my comments keeps disappearing. You're not reading it. Well, it means that they're not showing it. Is it this one? And his family continues to ask for the body. Yeah, I think I've read all your comments here, Trevor. So it means that the algorithm is hiding it. Yeah. I read all the comments, by the way. All the comments that come in, I read them. But if the algorithm has been acting up for some months and they're telling me that nothing is wrong, but I know the algorithm is not distributing the videos. So that is what perhaps is trying to hide some of the comments. Yeah. Oh, let me see now. No, you read every single one except for this one, which I posted 3 times. Which one? I'm censorship. Right, censorship in real time. Yeah, all your comments I'm reading. So some of them might not be showing up. I read this. A man was killed. I pulled up that. I read that too, and his family. I pointed out that. So all your recent comments I've had here, I've pulled them up, and the algorithm is what is and the algorithm, by the way, does whatever it wants to do. YouTube allows the algorithm, or they control the algorithm, so they do whatever they want to do. I shouldn't say the algorithm; it's the people who control the algorithm. Because I live in the now and prepare for the future, I have been warning my friends who went down a certain road due to lack of government and environmental support that they should really be smart moving. Yes. But the thing about it is that people are not going to listen now. They're so much emotionally charged and ideologically charged also that people allow their emotions and their ideologies to control them and their ability to think. So that is what we're seeing now in the world. And it is rather very disconcerting, if you'd ask me. No matter how much they try and change their lives, it's easy for them to go back that road. Yeah. And no matter how much struggles and, deprivation that the government imposes upon the people are still going to be deceived. They love to be deceived. People love propaganda, right? And that perhaps we're living in this, sports charged world. So that is what people live on and by. Let's see if you see it now. I just posted it. Well, hopefully I see some comments coming in now, but I don't know if that one is going to be among them. WHZ saying China is a communist country because it is the communists running the country and control in the hands of the state. When you read the history of communism and capitalism, there is not much difference between both. Okay, so the fact is that China applies a communist policy for its economics. That's for sure, right? It says it controls what most, like Michael Hudson, right, who is a very respected economist from the United States. What he suggests is that China is actually practicing the form of capitalism that the U.S. practiced and also Britain in the 18th and 19th century. So that was a form of capitalism that the government would control government-regulated industries, right? What we're having now is the free market industry, where we're saying allow the free markets to do whatever they want to do. Allow the private corporations to do whatever they want to do. But back in the 18th and 19th century, the way how America grew exponentially, and also Great Britain, was the fact that they regulated the market. So yes, China is a state-controlled capitalist nation, right? And that was the exact form of capitalism that the U.S. So it allows them to industrialize their country. That's why they're growing so rapidly, and they have been industrialized at a rapid pace and have outgone the United States and Europe. Right, because they're doing the same things that Europe and the United States did in the 18th and 19th century, and they have just thrown that out of the baby with the bathwater, and that is why now the Western economies are now suffering. But be careful when you say capitalism, because what type of capitalism? So China runs a state-controlled capitalist society economy, while the United States runs a free market, and which is leading to a non-industrialization of the country. That's why people are losing their jobs. And the facilities there are crumbling. The infrastructure in the United States crumbling, and they can't be compared a lot to what is happening in modern day China. All right, so we have to also, research and begin to reason when we talk about capitalism and communism. But I changed a word or two. Let me get now to Andrew, they are not letting you see my comment. Yeah, they're not, because I'm reading everything. I'm reading everything, Trevor. And I'm telling you, and I'm telling people that the algorithm is a powerful way they are suppressing the chat. In fact, I called and I spoke to somebody at YouTube. I told them that I lost 1,000 subscribers in 3 hours. And I contacted them, and they told me that it's behaving, your channel is behaving as normal. I said, how could it be behaving normally, and I've just lost 1,000 subscribers in an hour, 3 hours rather? And that's what happens, and you can't fight them, right? This is insane, for you to understand how I feel behind the scenes, what is happening. When I watch my videos and see that the algorithm is not distributing them, you must understand, I feel worse than how you're feeling. I wish you could see the comment section from my side. I can't, and that's the whole thing. I can't see it from your side. I wish I could. I'm not hiding any comment from you because I want more. The more comments, the better for me to keep me engaged and also for the audience to be engaged. WHZ saying, control is not in the hands of the private sector like how it is in a capitalist society. No, that is what it is. The control is in the hands of the private sector, yes, and that's what we're saying, WHZ. The people who send Mia Mottlers and the Andrew Holneses to power and the Trumps we are not the ones who send them into power. The private sector And these private corporations are the ones who send them to power because they, contribute to their campaign, right? So whatever Trump or Andrew Holness or Mia Mottley or anybody does, even the immigration laws that are being passed are because some private company is benefiting from these policies, right? Surveillance, even surveillance. These companies that make surveillance, technology, they're benefiting from, and that's why these governments cannot but do what they ask them to do, and it's not what we want them to do, right? That is what we mean by a free market, privately run corporation. Our governments are privately run corporations. They're not a public sector as we normally call them. They're not. They pretend to be, but they're not. Trevor saying, each time I reload the comment section, that means it doesn't want you to say that. All right, Trevor, if that's what you're doing, it means that the algorithm does not like the comment and it's wiping the comment off. Each time I reload the comment section, it's wiping the comment I kept trying to send you. Yeah, it's not, because I'm not doing, I can tell you that truthfully, I am not hiding any comment from my side. And there are not many comments coming in anyway, so, why would I need to hide them? The prison in Barbados, for sure, and likely others in the region are being managed by private firms. Everything that we do, everything in government now is being managed by even education. The military and prison industrial complex have expanded, and the boys, truly biblical times. Absolutely. That's what is happening. That is what is happening. Yes, so WHZ, that is what is happening. This is not a publicly run economy. And in fact, I would argue that we are more communist. The United States is more of a communist society, if you will, than China is. Because the government now is so much involved. The irony is that the government should be regulating the private companies, right? This is irony now. Listen to what I'm saying. The government, we put them there to regulate private companies, and they're making these obscene profits, right? Because we are the ones who have to pay for their obscene profits that they're making. On the other hand, the government says, I'm not going to regulate the persons that you have sent me to regulate. I'm going to regulate you, the people. And right now, they're regulating all our lives. Everything we do, they're watching and they're controlling us. So is that we're sending our governments into power to regulate us and to control every movement, which they should be doing for the private enterprise. That's why we sent them there in office, right? But we love it. We think that they're sent there to regulate these private corporations, but they're sent there to regulate us, the people, we the people. That's what they're sent there. Make sure you're sharing the live. I told you that the algorithm is not willing to share to distribute the live. Whatever is happening at YouTube, they have decided that the algorithm has decided that it won't share and distribute the video. So make sure you're sending it to all your friends and your family so that they can click and we can grow and we can beat this algorithmic system, because that's what it is doing. It doesn't want certain messages to be shared. We are the ones who have to push it. Push the system so the system does not exploit us, right? And this now, we're breaking the YouTube laws, right? And we're breaking it intelligently by sharing the live with other people. Algorithm, I know what you're doing. Okay, so we have any other comments? Any other comments? This police brutality has gotten a number of things. Let me just read to you what happened in Jamaica with this police brutality situation, because it's something that is it has been getting a lot of reactions and stuff like that. So it says here that cop shooting rage, and that's what the title of the article is. And it says here that Montego Bay, anger, grief, and fear hung heavily in Granville, St. James on Monday as residents protest death of Latoya Buju Bulgin by a single bullet from a cop's gun on Sunday. One resident bellowed accusations against the police, a safe distance away from journalists. Don't put me on no camera, admonished another who also expressed fear of being targeted. So people are afraid of the police. One resident who spoke after being assured her identity would not be revealed gave an account of Sunday's incident that has elicited strong opinions across the country. She said she was close to Bulgin, right? That is the person who was shot when she was shot. Okay, so she was close to her, so she has, she's an eyewitness. According to the woman, a cop asked Bulgin for her driver's license, and Bulgin gave him one from another country. All right, did you hear that? The lady gave him one from another country. Now, this is lawlessness. You ought not to add fuel to fire. If you have your driver's license, which should be from the country that you're driving in, well, I would think, because she lives there, then, why did she give him another one from another country? The cop continued to press Bulgin for the document, said the woman. Budge came out of the vehicle and tell the policeman to give her a ticket, and him say, "No, me I take up the car and me I go call the wrecker," Budge said. "All right, take the car," the woman said. She said the cop told Bulgin to exit the vehicle. Bulgin attempted to turn off the black Toyota Vox's engine, but it appears the van moved and then the cop fired. It's not like Budge was going to drive off or anything. Him no Budge. And after that, we see him give Budge one shot, and Budge just hold her chest and just drop back so, she said, mimicking the movement being described. So here we're seeing, according to what they're saying, that the information was that the police asked her to show him her license, her driver's license, apparently, and she gave him one from another country. And then she told him to give her a ticket. Just give me a ticket, she told the policeman. And apparently the policeman did not give her a ticket. And then he wanted to, I'm seeing now things coming in. So let me check your thing. I'm seeing now responses coming in. So this is, but I had to change some words. Let me see if I can see now if you have it. Classic example of the communist practices are the censorship we are literally experiencing right now. Right. All right. So the communist responses are what we are witnessing right now. Since the private firms took over, everything in the prison has gone up ridiculously expensive. And that is what we saw in globalization. That globalization really turned over our governments, not only in the US, but in the Caribbean, to private corporations. That's what they have done. And they call this the free market enterprise, but it is not any free market enterprise. When we say free, we mean that the free market, the business elites are able to run roughshod over us. They can do freely whatever they want to do. From that perspective. But if it's a perspective that we have access to markets and we can, export and to any market that we want to, it doesn't work like that. That is not true. People are afraid of the police, and even police are afraid of police. If you don't help them to do their dirty work, they will hurt you or end you and your family, Correct. They will kill you. Police continue to warn me not to join them. Yeah, and that is true. When you live in a society in which you are afraid of the government or the police, the police part of the government, the public sector. If we are afraid of our government, it means that we are living in a fascistic rulership, on a dictatorship. The government should be afraid of us, the people, but they're not. We are the ones who find ourselves afraid of them. And that's what we have to understand. Trevor is saying in Barbados, it has got to the point if the police rip you to shreds in the public, and the public will say you had it coming, even if it was for you looking at the police in the wrong way. Wow. So even to look at the police, it can wreck your life. Wow. So what if you're just looking and your eyes just were fixated on the police? Your eyes caught for, if some people say that. What if that was happening? accidentally, you looked inadvertently, your eyes caught the police. Should that be a problem? And sometimes you're not even looking at people. When you're looking at people, sometimes you're not even looking at them. Sometimes you're just, concentrating on something, and you might look up or look, sideways, and and you're not even looking at the people, at the person that the person might think you're looking at them, and you're not looking at them. And what if you're thinking and your face is not in the right way, does not please the police officer, then he can kill you, unalive you. That is sad. That is very, very sad. And that's a sad direction we're going into. So we were looking at, for those of you who are joining, Trump's new green card rules, and it could shake the Caribbean, migrants, deportations, and other things. And we're suggesting that if you are in the United States, that you might not necessarily need to leave, because if you leave, then that could end up complicating the matter for you. If you're, however, living in the Caribbean or another territory, that law will not affect you, right? Because the U.S. Embassy will move your application onto the Department of Homeland Security and other departments. But for those of you who are living in the United States, you perhaps need to consult with your lawyer, because this is going to be a matter of concern. And if you do not accede to the law, they might deport you. That's also another crisis that you have to face. WHZ saying, China has therefore molded communism using capitalism systems. China has beaten the system. Now, one of the things I'm seeing now, WHZ, is that we're living in an era of globalization. So it's not that this system is better than, or this system has beaten whatever. They are all working together, right? So China, for example, in China, you have lots of U.S. companies, right? Lots of the U.S. billionaires are in China, and they have their companies operating in China, investing in Chinese companies, investing in Chinese infrastructure. So can we say on the globalization that we are living in sovereign states where one country is, in charge of this or whatever, or doing better than the other? From a superficial perspective, yes. From a perspective of what globalization is about, no, because globalization, all of them are involved, and they're all helping each other, right? But what is happening, WHZ, is that our private sector, the people who live in your country, the oligarchs, are not necessarily patriotic. They're not patriotic, right? And they don't consider, they might be Barbadians, or they might be Jamaicans, or they might be Trinidadians or United States citizens, but they do not hold allegiance to that particular territory. They hold their allegiance to the money that they're making. So if they're going to make the money in Russia, they're going to make their money in Russia. Even though we say, oh, Russia is an enemy of the United States. Is it really? Maybe for the people, for the public, for public consumption. But for the oligarchs, for the business elites, it's not. Certainly not. Then we have Trevor saying, good slaves chanting to self-eradicate because they believe they are individually special, so they don't care what happens to you. Social credit system alive and kicking. And I believe that the Chinese model is going to be implemented, and is being implemented, right? Is being implemented in the Western Hemisphere, the social credit system. So when we think that they are operating against each other, and I just pointed out to you the meeting with Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, and what we're seeing is that Donald Trump is willing to say, we're going to forego the arms deal that we had with Taiwan so that we can acquiesce and we can have some sort of agreement with the Chinese in terms of how we're going to deal with Iran. Okay, and because China is concerned about what is happening in Taiwan, and Taiwan wanting to be an independent sovereign nation, and China is saying no, and the U.S. was backing Taiwan in years, But the U.S. backing a country does not mean that it is supporting you, It means that it's just selling you arms and it's taking advantage of the deals that it can make. But if it finds another deal that is, that is more profitable, it's going to leave you there hanging. because the US has no interest. All of what we're seeing playing out today are business interests. It has nothing to do with China versus the United States or whatever. Okay? Trevor is saying the Chinese model is being pushed. Absolutely. And they all agreed to it at Davos last year. And I'm happy you mentioned Davos, the World Economic Forum, because they're all a part of it. The United Nations, they're all a part of it. China, Russia, the United States, right? All on the United Security Council. And countries have been calling that, you can't just have these 5 countries on the United Nations Security Council. You need to have other nations to make the United Nations more democratic. China doesn't seem to want to have it. They're all doing the same thing and pretend to be fighting against each other while they're controlling us. Right? So if you ask me, I don't trust China, I don't trust Cuba, I don't trust the United States, I don't trust countries. I trust the laws, right? And laws that will help to democratic laws, I should say. Is North Korea also involved? I've always wondered. That's a very good question. That's a very, very good question. They could be. I don't have any evidence that they're involved, but they could be, because every day you hear things coming that the United States is against them, and it's just back and forth. So I want to think that they're all a part of it. I want to think that they're all a part of an agenda. Now, they do have different business interests, as I'm suggesting to you, because our governments are corporations. Depending on what company is going to eke out more in the creation of this new world order, they will fight because they have competing economic interests, right? But it doesn't mean, therefore, that they're fighting on your side. That's the point I want to make. When you look at these countries, and that's why I think many people are siding with Iran and with Cuba, because they think that they represent freedom, the democratic freedoms that they're looking for. And I'm saying to you, no, because the countries that we live in are more so corporations. And what they're doing is what is in the interest of these reigning elites. So they're doing what is in the interest of the reigning elites. And some of the elites will lose too. But let's not side with these people. Let's side with our democratic rights and say to them, we know what you're doing. You've put us into a globalized economy where all of you are working together. That's what it means by globalization, a globalized system, right? And you expect us to believe that we are sovereign when we're subjected to global and international laws, right? That make some countries richer than some, right? That's what happens in the Caribbean. That's what they made Trinidad, for example, to become the economic hub of the Caribbean. The laws that they created. It's not Trinidad that just overnight became the economic hub. They formulated treaties that created that sort of system. And then we blame Trinidad. Oh, Trinidad is exploiting the Caribbean because she's just following the laws of globalization. And the laws of globalization mean that some countries are going to prosper while some countries are impoverished. That is the raw reality. And that's why we have to understand the root. But many of us are reacting, and we're going to hate on Trinidadians because their economy is doing better and they are more industrialized. But we ought not to blame them. We have to blame the system in which they operate. Okay? And then we have here, Trevor is saying, let's say China and North Korea were friends based on interest. They will still be a part of it by default. Yes, correct, Andrew. Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that a lot of what we see in public is not really what happens in private. All right? They have secret meetings and they decide what they want. But they do give us things so we can chew on so that we don't know what is happening in the inner sanctums. We won't protest, or we will try to be distracted so that they can get their agenda out. And that's exactly what they're effectively doing. And they are doing a great job because the citizens of the world are largely ignorant. So they can exploit us, and they are exploiting us. Okay? This is why the Caribbean and Africa now people are chanting, "We are being liberated," but it's only change in masters. Yeah, we're not being liberated. We're not being liberated, right? Because as Marcus Garvey said, liberation comes when you control your economic resources. And does Jamaica control its economic resources? No. Does Barbados? Does Trinidad? Even though it's oil rich? Does Guyana, even though it's also another oil rich country in CARICOM? No. Right? So if we're not economically independent, then we can't be free. Just going around and making some rhetoric and some nice speeches and looking presidential or prime ministerial does not mean that we are free. And that's what the people mean by we're free. When they hear, some African president talk about, oh, we need to stand up to the United States and we need to ensure that our people prosper. And it sounds nice words. And, we have to say, great speech. But the speech does not mean that we are independent. And that is what people like to do. They like to use rhetoric, and rhetoric sounds to them as if the person's a great leader or the person is trying to fight for our rights. And behind the scenes, what agreements did they have? We don't know. But we know in the sense that every speech that they make, we can see now, up to now, that they never materialize. And that is how we know that we are being played. Right? We don't know the specifics of the words and the agreements that they make behind the scenes, but we know based on what we are seeing happening in reality. When Trump comes and say that, Iran and ourselves and the United States have inked out a peace deal, and then next day he's bombing the country, then we know that that is nonsense. Nonsense. No peace deal was inked out. Well, peace according to them, but certainly not peace not according to what we think as peace. And that is why I think the book 1984, George Orwell said that war is peace. Because that is what when they tell us that it's peace, think about war. When they tell us that it's economic prosperity, think about poverty and economic decline. When they tell you about safety, think about insecurity. You've always got to think the opposite of what your leaders tell you. But you're not going to do that because you're just, people just like to believe in government. Now, we have Trevor saying people don't even recognize lots of the YouTube videos about regional leaders are paid propaganda. They don't understand that. And those very leaders are the main puppet clowns, but people love their idols. And that is what it is about. One of the reasons, Trevor, the other day, it was probably about 7 months ago, this channel was seeing a huge momentum, a huge climb in subscribers, and people were watching the videos because the war on Venezuela was happening, and I was talking about what Trinidad is doing and all of that stuff, Mia Motley and the likes. Now, when I told them, Trevor, that this is what they're seeing is just a preamble to a larger war as we know it, the war of Armageddon, a bigger, larger spiritual and religious war. Oh, I don't want to hear about religion. I don't want to hear about religion. I come to hear about politics. But what they don't understand, what these people don't understand is that all of what you're seeing is going to wound up about the mark of the beast and the Armageddon. Why? Because the evangelists who control Trump and his policies, right? These are the religious people behind Trump. But you don't want to hear about religion. So how are religious people formulating Trump's policies? And you think religion is something, just a footnote. What is in the brain? I don't know. I'm really trying to find out what is in the brain. That is what I'm trying to find out. Because you're seeing, but in their idea, in their mindset, right? They can't see. They can only see a warfare between Venezuela and the United States, Cuba and the United States, and there's nothing else. There's nothing else behind those wars. Just the United States being the aggressor and Cuba being the victim. That's all you see. And that is not analysis. That is just superficial understanding. It's not even understanding at all. Right? Because what you see is not what you get. But they don't want to listen. They don't want to listen. The physical is making moves in the spiritual world and vice versa. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the spiritual war. And we were told in Ephesians, again, the point I was trying to make, Trevor, and I think I sort of missed my train of thoughts. I sort of, it went away. But what I was suggesting here is that people remove themselves from spirituality. So because they're lacking, they're empty, they don't have any sort of spiritual awareness, idols fill that vacuum. So the Beyoncés, the sports personalities, and you think these people are so important, the Obamas, the celebrities, these are now what is filling the void, the spiritual void. So because you're empty, see, that is why you have to run after Trump if Trump is the one that you follow, or Kamala Harris if Kamala is the one that you follow, or Xi Jinping if he's the one that you follow, or the one in Burkina Faso, Traore, right? Because these are your saviors. These are your spiritual, gurus. They're your messiahs. Okay? Until you realize that they are part of a system, right? Whether the Traores of the world, they are part of a system. And that is what you have to understand. And if you and I should become a part of the system, is that we're going to accept it or we're going to leave it. Okay? And that's why many noble men and women choose not to be in politics, because it is a very evil system. It's controlled by higher forces that you and I cannot imagine, we're not aware of. And the people like the Gabriel Estevan, that is what he is actually trying to teach people, that the rulers that we're seeing here are just in the physical realm, but there is a spiritual realm, dimension that you and I, outside of the Bible, have not been made aware of. We're not fighting against Iran. We're not fighting against the United States. We're fighting against demonic forces in high places. Right? And they want to kill, to steal, and to destroy. And they're killing. And they love it. So, yeah, this is where we're going, and this is what we have to point out to you. All right, so any other comments? I think we have had a great live in terms of not many people joining, but again, you have to share the live and make sure you're liking it so that the algorithm is not going to send out the lives. They're not interested in doing that. Yes, they lack any sort of introspection, discernment, and conviction. That's why they ran to get the vax, to stay in their system, right? To be made by the system, to live and die for the system killing them. Very well said. Very well said. Yeah. And they will do it tomorrow and the next day and the next day with new evidence and with new tactics used to control them, right? Because that is what they look for. Anything the government says, everyone hit the like. Yes, please hit the like and please share the live so that the algorithm can send it to across the world. We need this information now to get out. YouTube is actually trying to bury as much as it can very good content, okay, that I'm producing. It peaked 17 persons in early morning live. I think it's a lot of people. Thank you for your work. Yeah, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. And we will try to see if we can, vary the time, maybe sometime in the morning. I was thinking of giving top stories in the mornings. I don't know if that's a very good thing to do on YouTube Live in the morning, to do top stories, since we have a lot of competition in the afternoon. So maybe in the mornings or in the midday, in the afternoon, give some top news stories that perhaps that we need to be aware of as we head into the afternoon into the days. What do you think about that? What do you think about afternoon or morning sessions? because the evening might be very competitive in terms of many people having many other programs to watch, and they don't want to share their audiences. I'm getting it. Yeah, say go home. FBA all damn way. What is that? What's that? What is this about? Who is FBAs? Um, then we have the may the Almighty continue to bless you and us here and walk with us. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope that we will be able to continue our live when we can, so that we'll be able to get more incisive analyses, because we need it. We need it at this time. Too much deception and propaganda is reigning, and we need to be properly informed as to who controls the world. And that is what most people, the large majority of people, are unaware of, and we have to properly inform them. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see each other in another live discussion. Share the live now. Make sure you share the live. Share the live with as many people as you can, so that it can be replayed. Also, have you seen the statement from the Pope about the AI regulation? That's what I will have to do on another live in terms of the encyclical. Yes, I will have to do that on another live. Afternoon, people might be at work or preparing for home. So morning is a bit tricky for a similar reason, but try a few more times to prove it. Yes, I will try to, and then we probably go back to maybe a midday one, and then we go back, if we need to, go back to the afternoon session. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you for your participation. It was quite beneficial. Ciao.